there is a growing discussion here in the United States about this invasion and what it's going to look like. We gave you a preview a little bit of this in our commentary in the U.S. military block, but the point here is just to highlight the domestic political conversation around all of us. I found it especially interesting, actually, to see Tucker Carlson plant his flag against some of the conventional wisdom on the right, and really in the establishment right now, basically, which is let Israel do whatever it wants. He's asking the critical question, what about us? What is going to happen to us if we allow all of this to happen? Let's take a listen.
What is the objective of the IDF and of Blinken, of the United States and Israel in this short term? Destroy Hamas, but what does that mean?
Well, to destroy Hamas in the minds, I think, of policymakers in Washington as well as in Israel is to systematically root them out and kill them in Gaza. Now, let's be frank, when you go into an urban environment, you can't pick or choose your targets very easily. First of all, no matter how well trained you are, you're moving into an area that is rubbled. There are ruins. It's very difficult to negotiate in that. When I say negotiate, I mean negotiate the terrain through the rubble. You don't know where the enemy's going to pop up. Once you destroy all these buildings, he can be anywhere. So you're going to take losses going in. But more important, once you start going in there, you're going to end up killing whatever you find. Because the soldier, the Israeli soldier, the American soldier, very much the same, they want to live. They want to survive. When in doubt, pull the trigger. They're not going to stop and say, now, wait a minute, before I shoot, I really need to think about this because that may be a civilian or there may be a family there. That's not going to happen. You can't expect that. So the notion that this is a kind of warfare that is so precise that it can avoid so-called collateral damage is just nonsense. We can't expect miracles that we will assist and support the Israelis in freeing those hostages. Again, the problem is, how do you get the hostages out when you're fighting in this extraordinarily dirty and complex environment? What's to prevent the hostages from simply being executed as soon as you move in force into Gaza? I think the Israelis know that. I think our leadership in Washington knows it. They may have even decided that if that happens, that's tragic, but the ultimate goal of destroying Hamas demands this.
Pretty interesting, I think, to come from Tucker Carlson on his show. It's part of a longer clip. I encourage everybody to go watch it. It's like 30 minutes, where him and Douglas McGregor just go back and forth like, okay, it looks like we're going to war with Iran. What does that mean? Is it worth it? What about the actual military objective here? To, again, just emphasize something that you mentioned previously, let's put this up there on the screen from the Times of Israel itself. It says, IDF believes it is ready for the ground invasion and that it should start soon. The army wants to carry out an incursion even at the cost of heavy losses, fears that the political echelon may never give the order despite a high level of readiness. Israel saying its war against Hamas destroying the Iranian-backed infrastructure and has vowed to dismantle the organization. However, the Times of Israel has learned after 16 days of airstrikes, the IDF has told the government it is fully prepared for a ground offensive in Gaza and believes that it can achieve the goals set out for it, even at the risk of heavy casualties to the soldiers and amid ongoing attacks by Hezbollah in the north. But the military is fearing the government may not give it. As you mentioned, Ryan, the hostage situation is just such a political football inside of Israel. But if I had to guess, and really what I think that this does show you is this is the most, right-wing government in the history of Israel. If even they have pause about going in before giving the green light of going into Gaza, it, I think, just tells you what the stakes are to any political decision maker. These people are not stupid. They know exactly what is going to happen. They're, in some cases, doing their best. In some cases, they're trying to have a middle road. America knows what's going to happen. Pretty much everybody does. It's just in a wait-and-see period, and it's coming down to the question of, like, are you really going to push the button? Like, are you going to say, green light, go in? What does that look like? What does the next day look like? What does the next year look like? What does the next decade look like after you make that incredibly consequential decision? So I find it very interesting that even Netanyahu and his government, one of the most right-wing governments in the history of Israel, even they are taking a tremendous amount of pause right now. Sure, they're doing the airstrikes, but that's just simply not the same thing as going in and suffering heavy casualties.
And I think the more people, and when it comes from the United States military, it's that much more powerful to Israel, who are asking the question, why? What is your objective and what's your plan here? The harder it gets for them to carry out this military incursion. If you think back to the way that the U.S. kind of war gamed out the Ukrainian counteroffensives,
Yes.
They have a very sophisticated war game effort where they sit around and they say, all right, you're playing Hamas, you know, you're playing Islamic Jihad, you're playing Iran, you know, you're playing the Syrian proxies, you're the Iraqi proxies, and they game it out. And every counteroffensive that they kind of gamed out was a failure, and then they ran it anyway. The counteroffensive that was a success, they had gamed that one out, and they had figured out, you know, through that sophisticated strategizing, you know, how they were going to punch through. So they're doing that now, as we talked about in that previous block. The top Marine general who has the most experience in this type of combat is with them. That means his entire staff, all his analysts, are gaming this out. And you know, we don't have all the access to all the information that they do, but we can see the same thing. That every different move that you make has 8 different counters. And then at the end of it, even if you counter all those, you ask, well, then what? Okay, you have eliminated Hamas, the organization, that its leaders. Qatar has even turned them over, turned over the people that are in Doha to the Israelis. They're all locked up or dead. An organization similar to Hamas is going to be produced by a population that wants to resist Israel. So then what? And so you have some in Israel who are saying, well, this is the kind of third expulsion that we're going to do of Palestinians. Like we're going to solve
Like
this
the most right-wing faction.
right,
Yeah.
most right-wing faction. Like we're going to solve this once and for all. Like and if there's a broader regional war, that gives us a chaotic cover. So after we level northern Gaza, we're pushing down into southern Gaza, we're leveling that, and Egypt can figure it out or whatever. Like it's not a completely thought out strategy, but it's being articulated by people there who are like, there is no solution here. The solution here is to just clear out Gaza. And so other than that, nobody's actually putting forward an end game that results in anything that resembles what people talk about with a two-state solution and two nations living next to each other.
Well, this is why, you know, we have to then think about what the cost of this is going to be. So let's put this up there on the screen. This is the number of casualties that have been reported. Again, let's take the extreme caveat of these are the numbers according to the quote-unquote officials inside both of these places and the United Nations. 1,400 in Israel, 5,087 in Gaza. That's according to Hamas. So look, who knows how much of it is true? Have no clue, cannot verify that number. Yet, though, it is probably directionally true. It's definitely in the thousands, right? So how high? Obviously, we're also in the fog of war. And what does that look like? And I think what's definitely also true is the scenes inside of Gaza that are getting passed around, again, the entire Arab world. These people are looking at this stuff on WhatsApp every day. If you think America has a Twitter problem, you've never been to Qatar or Saudi Arabia. All these people are on Twitter. I remember seeing at one point, it was like 70-something% of the population in Saudi Arabia gets their news on Twitter. This is a Twitter-obsessed culture, and their Twitter does not have community notes, just so everybody knows.
And a side note on that, when all of these journalists were fleeing Twitter for threads, it just reminded me how little they care about the rest of the world and foreign policy. I couldn't do my job in reporting on Pakistan or the Middle East or Ukraine or anywhere else without Twitter, Haiti, Bolivia, whatever. Everybody's on there, and then they have WhatsApp, the channels that they're pushing all of these videos to too. So
WhatsApp, Telegram, and Twitter are like the lifeblood for information sources. It has nothing to do with official news or any of that. Most of these countries are far ahead of us in terms of their reliance.
Right, they don't care what the New York Times says about
independent media. Exactly, and these are the scenes that they're seeing. Let's put these up there. These are the ones that we've been able to gather that just show you what some of the rubble looks like in terms of the footage that has been coming out. That's at least been verified by some of the journalists that are there on the ground. So you can see here like what exactly it is. I mean, we've got a decent percentage of the housing stock in Gaza that has now been destroyed. It does look and is reminiscent very much of Aleppo or some of the other scenes that used to come out of Syria. Some of these, in the cases like you were talking about the particulates, but I just think people need to understand, like, the entire Arab world are watching videos like this, and we're watching these videos, Ryan, before we have actually seen combat. Now, let's take, look, I'm one of those guys where I'm not proud of it, but I was on Live Leak from a very early age. RIP to Live Leak. You can watch, probably still around, a lot of the combat footage that came out of the war in ISIS. It was right there. If you wanted to go look for it, I'm talking about guys with GoPros to their chests who were getting shot, killed, blown up right there, and it was all being live streamed for the entire world to see. It will be like that times who knows how much.
Not just confined to Live Leak dudes.
Exactly, not just confined to Live Leak and guys who want to look like, you know, what it looks like when people fire, I forget what those anti-tank missiles.
Yeah.
No, it was something else. Anyway, these videos were everywhere at the time. But it was just for, like, you know, weirdos like me who were covering the conflict and others who were obsessed with watching what's happening on the ground. This is the entire world basically getting exposed to that. I mean, that scene that we just showed you, now imagine that an Israeli platoon is trying to assault it, and there's IEDs everywhere, and people are getting blown up, and there are fighters there in the background, and there's RPGs raining down, and then there's a jet comes through and tries to take out a position. This is a single tactical thing that I'm just describing, and then multiply it by 100 or 200 or whatever that happens, and it happens day after day after day. It's like having that situation is just so it's so foreign, I think, to anything that we've experienced in the modern media environment, and it's just something that we really can't look away from. It's impossible because the rest of the world is going to be paying so much attention, and it just highlights, if that is this case, there is just no scenario where a broader war cannot be avoided. It's impossible if that is going to occur. So it's a catch-22 for the Israelis, but really it's a big catch-22 for us and the American political system.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.